Building a legacy that reflects God's glory and furthers His kingdom is a calling that transcends mere material accumulation. Wealth, in its essence, is a resource entrusted to us by God, and its ultimate purpose is not just to meet our personal needs, but to contribute to something eternal and transformative. The Bible provides us with countless examples and principles to understand how to use wealth in a way that honors God, benefits others, and leaves a lasting spiritual impact. This requires a shift in perspective, viewing wealth not as an end in itself, but as a tool for fulfilling God's purposes. From the very beginning, Scripture makes it clear that everything we have belongs to God. Psalm 24 verse 1 declares, "The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." This foundational truth reminds us that we are not owners of the resources we possess. We are stewards. A steward is someone entrusted with managing someone else's property responsibly. When we understand that our wealth is not truly ours, but is given to us by God, it changes how we approach money and possessions. Instead of asking, "How can I use this for myself?" we begin to ask, "How can I use this for God's glory?" One of the most powerful illustrations of using wealth for God's kingdom comes from the life of King David. In 1 Chronicles 29, David sets an example of sacrificial giving when he donates a vast amount of his personal wealth for the construction of the temple. Not only does he give generously, but he also inspires the leaders and people of Israel to do the same. David's prayer acknowledges that everything they gave came from God in the first place, saying, "But who am I, and who are my people, that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand." This story teaches us that using wealth for God's kingdom starts with a heart of gratitude and a willingness to give back to Him what is already His. Another critical principle is the importance of prioritizing eternal investments over temporary gains. In Matthew 6 verses 19 to 21, Jesus teaches, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." This passage challenges us to evaluate our financial priorities. Are we focused on accumulating wealth for personal comfort and security, or are we seeking to use it to make an eternal impact by advancing God's work on earth? Investing in God's kingdom might look like supporting missionaries, funding ministries, helping the poor, or building institutions that spread the gospel and transform lives. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25 verses 14 to 30 further illustrates the responsibility of using wealth wisely for God's purposes. In the parable, a master entrusts his servants with varying amounts of money and expects them to manage it well while he is away. Upon his return, he rewards the servants who have multiplied their resources and rebukes the one who buried his talent out of fear. This story highlights the importance of being proactive and diligent with what God has entrusted to us. It is not enough to simply preserve wealth. We are called to grow it and use it in ways that reflect God's priorities. Whether we have much or little, the key is faithfulness in using our resources to honor Him. Generosity is a cornerstone of building a legacy for God's kingdom. Proverbs 11 verse 25 states, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Generosity is not limited to financial giving. It includes sharing our time, talents, and other resources to bless others. In Acts 20 verse 35, Paul quotes Jesus, saying, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." When we give generously, we not only meet the needs of others, but also reflect God's character, as He is the ultimate giver. Moreover, generosity plants seeds of faith and hope in others, drawing them closer to God and creating ripple effects that can last for generations. One way to use wealth for God's kingdom is by addressing the needs of the poor and marginalized. Throughout Scripture, God demonstrates a special concern for the vulnerable. In Proverbs 19 verse 17, we are reminded, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward them for what they have done." Similarly, in Isaiah 58 verses 6 to 7, God calls His people to loose the chains of injustice, share food with the hungry, and provide shelter for the homeless. By using our resources to uplift those in need, We participate in God's redemptive work and showcase His love in tangible ways. Another aspect of building a legacy for God's kingdom involves equipping the next generation. Psalm 78 verses 4-7 encourages us to teach God's commands and deeds to our children so that they may put their trust in Him and not forget His works. Financially, this might involve supporting Christian education, mentoring young leaders, or creating scholarships that enable others to pursue their God-given callings. When we invest in the spiritual growth and development of others, we are planting seeds that can bear fruit for years to come. Using wealth for God's kingdom also requires a spirit of humility and dependence on Him. In Deuteronomy 8 verses 17-18, God warns the Israelites not to become prideful, saying, "You may say to yourself, 'My power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me.' But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth." This verse reminds us that all our abilities and opportunities come from God. When we acknowledge this, we are less likely to idolize wealth and more likely to use it as a tool for His glory. Prayer and discernment are essential as we seek to build a legacy for God's kingdom. James 1 verse 5 promises, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." When we seek God's guidance in how to use our resources, He can direct us to opportunities that align with His will and maximize the impact of our giving. Whether it's supporting a specific ministry, starting a charitable foundation, or helping a neighbor in need, God's wisdom ensures that our efforts bear fruit for His kingdom. A true legacy is not just about what we leave behind, but about the lives we impact along the way. In 2 Corinthians 9 verses 12-13, Paul explains that generosity results in thanksgiving to God and glorifies Him. When we use our wealth to bless others, it points them to the source of all blessings, God Himself. This eternal impact is far more valuable than any earthly accolade or inheritance. Our goal should be to hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," knowing that our resources were used to further God's work and transform lives for His glory. Ultimately, building a legacy for God's kingdom is about aligning our hearts with His purposes. It's about recognizing that our wealth, talents, and opportunities are gifts from Him and using them to serve others and advance His mission. This requires faith, intentionality, and a willingness to let go of earthly attachments in favor of eternal treasures. By living as faithful stewards, generous givers, and humble servants, we can leave a legacy that reflects God's love and brings hope to a world in need. Such a legacy is not measured in dollars or possessions, but in lives changed and souls drawn closer to the Creator.